Jordan Peterson. He is interviewing journalist Louise Perry. I don't know much about her. Do you know anything about her?
Never heard of her, but I imagine probably going to get familiar.
This is on the Daily Wire. And they're, of course, talking about, what is it, property crimes?
Yeah, right.
I mean, yeah, women. That's it. Yeah,
but interchangeable.
That's what I meant.
Yeah, okay.
That's right.
Yeah. So it's called a homonym.
Property crimes, crimes against women. Or actually, to be clear, I'm sorry. It's crime against the owner of the property. So it's really a crime against men. Let's be clear about that.
That it wouldn't hurt feelings. There's also, I think, an element of women being slightly physically frightened.
Right. Well, it boils down to personal rejection then, eh?
Yeah. Yeah. Which is a painful thing to
because
deliver.
that's the only excuse you have left.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, here's something else that's worth pondering. You talked about one of the advantages of the sexual revolution was the transformation of the idea that rape was a property crime, let's say, into a crime against the woman herself. And I would say, look, I have plenty of sympathy for that perspective. And I think it's fundamentally true. But I'm going to push back because, this is all very complicated. It isn't obvious to me.
Pause it for 1 second. I want to I got to imagine that most of the people listening, are following what he's saying here, but I really need people to fully, understand this. When I was born, I'm not that old. When I was born, in most states in this country, it may have been also even in Massachusetts, woman who was married to a man was just about his property. And I think in many states, like the crime of rape did not exist between a woman who was married to a man. It was impossible as a matter of law for that man to rape her. Didn't exist. It was not a crime. My mother, when I was I think I was like 6, was not allowed to have a credit card in her name because she was a woman. This is 1972. It's not that long ago. This is like the Beatles were just breaking up. Let's put it that way. And so what he's talking about is that if someone raped a woman who was married, it was a property crime, as if somebody had come by and desecrated your car.
Yeah.
Well, we live in capitalism, and there's nothing worse than a property crime.
Or if you rape somebody's daughter, it's a crime against the father.
Yes, it was a crime against the husband, not against the woman. It was a crime against the man who owned the woman.
The property owner.
The property owner. So just go back so you can understand when he's like, well, I want to push back. It's fundamentally true, but I want to push back on that.
Have to be careful.
Got to be careful about, they're going to be walking around and having their own podcasts. And God.
Here's something else that's worth pondering. You talked about one of the advantages of the sexual revolution was the transformation of the idea that rape was a property crime, let's say, into a crime against the woman herself. And I would say, look, I have plenty of sympathy for that perspective.
Lots of sympathy.
And I think it's fundamentally true. But I'm going to push back because, this is all very complicated. It isn't obvious to me that offers women enough defense. And so the counter argument might be if untrammeled sexual access to a young woman is a crime, in order for that to be recognized as a crime properly, it has to be viewed as something that will bring the males on her side to her defense in principle. Now, maybe not, right? Because you could say, maybe we can set up a...
So this is a fundamentally conservative worldview. It's not the system that needs changing. We just need to feed more into patriarchy, right? Let's not challenge that notion. In order to get women's rights and a violent crime against her respected by a legal system, let's kind of turn the clock back and make it so that it's more of a crime against the men in her life. What if she doesn't have men in her life? Well, I don't know. so that she can be recognized. He shouldn't use his platform to challenge notions of patriarchy and to promote the idea that women in and of themselves are people who can experience crime and violent crime. Let's just make it a little bit more male focused, because like he is speaking to young men, and what he fortifies with them on a daily basis with his show is the notion that their own grievances and that the harm that's imposed on them is the only real thing that matters in this world.
But I also like, why does he think that the only way to get majority of men to say like, let's not allow rapes in this society is to get them sort of financially on the hook or somehow, like to make it clear that materially that's like there's other reasons to not want people being raped.
Well, because you would have to empathize with women at that point. He's saying that rape is it will not get sufficiently prosecuted if it is not considered a crime against men. But that's how little he thinks of the men in his audience and how limited his capacity for empathy is because the men in his audience and he himself don't have the ability to see women as equal to themselves in agency, in emotion, in capacity to understand the world around them. And so that's why he has to frame it as a crime against men as well.
Well, he's also saying that laws are irrelevant on some level. Because he's saying that if there isn't a sort of wide acceptance that rape is a bad thing by men, then the law is not going to be effective enough. The law is really, to him, just an extension of God anointing men as being in charge of society, and that the law is, in many respects, he's saying here, a fiction if it is not embraced, if it is not enthusiastically, men aren't enthusiastically invested in that law. And he's not talking men generally. He's saying like literally
invested financially.
The gender of men. Like if it is not an affront to me, then the law be damned is what he's saying. But let's just go back and let him speak.
The way this played out in history is like wealthy men could rape whatever women from lower classes they want. And if there's any complaint, it's like, well, what are you going to do?
Yeah. Good thing, when women were literally chattel, good thing there was no rape back then, right? Because men were financially invested in that woman, that piece of property for him not getting ruined. Well, and so I didn't also realize that unmarried women can't get raped. Apparently, they can't get raped, or because
it's a crime against the father.
Or if they do, I guess right.
That's what it is. But like William Byrd, the main slave, or in the James River in Virginia in like the 18th century, has his whole diary, and he has multiple entries where he's like, I forced myself upon like a chambermaid and stuff like that. The only time he has any sort of repentance is when he got too drunk and came on to another man's wife at a party.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, so go back a little bit.
Is a crime. In order for that to be recognized as a crime properly, it has to be viewed as something that will bring the males on her side to her defense in principle. Now, maybe not, right? Because you could say, well, maybe we could set up a society where merely, quote, transgressing the rights of a woman to say no is sufficient. But it's not obvious to me that that's sufficient. Like maybe sufficient means not only do you violate the integrity of the woman in a fundamental sense, but you enrage all of her male protectors. And then that's enough of a barrier, because God only knows how much barrier we need. And obviously, well, you just laid out a bunch of problems, especially now that the pill introduces, and we should stress that. The problem that women have in saying no once they're on the pill is that it's instantly personal. And that means the woman has to deliver a pretty hard blow. And that's especially problematic if she's somewhat potentially interested in the guy, right? How do I say no without hurting his feelings, alienating him, making him into an enemy, looking like a prude? And I mean, when you're 16, you don't know the answer to any of those questions. Like, you're not sophisticated enough to. And I saw this in my clinical practice all the time. I had lots of women in my clinical practice who were abused serially. And, they were generally stunningly unsophisticated in their conduct. And I'm not trying to blame the victim. I'm just saying that sophisticated women, and those are often those who've been.
I pause it because he won't finish his thought. He won't finish his thought here because at one point he starts to realize, like, he starts to hear what he's saying here. Now, just imagine, apply this to this notion, if he would be okay with this. Maybe we need to have people own all of the property in my home so that if someone was to steal it, there'd be enough people who are upset to make it a real violation as opposed to it being stolen from me. I mean, that's what he's saying there, except for his is actually more disgusting because it is, I don't know, like, do we need to own, let's put it this way, do we as a society, or does there need to be a group of people, or half of society needs to in some way, or there needs to be some people in Jordan Peterson's life who owns him as chattel so that if someone comes up and punches him in the face, it becomes illegal enough that people care.
He could get raped. Jordan Peterson could get raped. Who would that crime then be? For the legal system to take it seriously. If Jordan Peterson were raped.
Own him.
I mean, I'm like, this is very dangerous. Like, this is very, very dangerous. And this is just a natural progression of who he's spoken to, men who are frustrated and are looking for women to blame, right? It's always from the perspective of the male. It's never about extending empathy to others. And the actual natural conclusion of rape not being taken seriously and crimes against women being taken seriously should be more empathy should be extended to women, and you should be able to understand their experiences. Not, well, men need to have more stake in this for this to be taken seriously. And what he was saying about the pill, it makes things more complicated. Implicit in his analysis, whatever you can decipher from it, is that it's
giving women too many choices.
Rape is a misunderstanding. It's a misunderstanding, and the 16-year-olds, they don't have the agency or the sophistication to stand up for themselves. But that's not what rape is. It's also not a violation of someone's integrity. That's what he kept saying, the woman's integrity. It's a violent crime. It's a violent assault. That's what rape is.
But Emma, what you don't understand is if you allow women or girls to have sex without becoming pregnant and you give them control over their own ability to get pregnant, then they may decide they want to have sex without the consequence of pregnancy, and that complicates things because then their little pea brains have to determine, do I want to have sex with this person or not? Even though there's no consequence in terms of a child, and that complicates things, and then the man is not sure and he rapes her because she can't figure it out.
And that reminds me of all these unsophisticated, and I'm not trying to blame the victims, but these girls, they don't know their ass from their elbows, and they keep getting serially abused, and I have no idea why a psychological organization would want to maybe review my credentials on this stuff.
I mean, talk about, honestly, talk about just sort of like just a walking opportunity for a class action suit.
You go from the pill to like unsophisticated, serially abused students. Like, what are we?
It's
and
because
you don't finish a thought a single time.
Well, it gets complicated because they have the ability to determine that they might want to have sex without getting
stupid,
pregnant.
and they walk right into these things.
All right, let's just keep playing.
If a man gets raped, I want to know who has the stake in solving that crime. I just want to know.
Stunningly unsophisticated in their conduct, and I'm not trying to blame the victim. I'm just saying that sophisticated women, and those are often those they've had a lot of good relationships with men, brothers and fathers in particular.
Thanks, bros.
Sophisticated women signal to men who are getting a little pushy, in no uncertain terms, very early in the pushing game, that no is the answer.
Stop it. Pause
Right.
for a sec. Okay, so that is him saying that women who have had good relationships with men, because it all stems
we
from
set
it.
you straight.
Yeah, right. They are sophisticated enough to know when to say no. The unsophisticated types, people who might not have had good relationships with men, they don't know how to stand up to men, and that's kind of on them, right?
Look,
or their upbringing. It's definitely not on the rapist because they're unsophisticated.
It's complicated. There are two parties involved here. There is the sometimes a little bit too pushy men, and then the stupid women who. That's why they get raped.
And they might get drunk too, right? That would be very stupid and low class.
You don't want to drink around a pushy boy. All men are sophisticated. Some are just slightly more pushy than others. And then you have stupid women
girls
and
walking around like bimbos.
Now, I want to make it clear.
And it's complicated.
Not all women are stupid. The ones who have been trained by men in their life are more smart.
There you go.
But the ones who have not, those are the ones who don't know how to deal with a slightly pushy male who wants to slightly pushy themselves into that woman against her wishes. But she's unsophisticated and doesn't know how to deal with it.
And I'm not blaming the victim.
And I want to make that clear. I'm not blaming the victim. I've made that clear. In fact, I said that word, said those words just now as a way of proving that I'm not blaming that stupid idiot who was untrained. It's not her fault that she was not trained properly by men to deal with a slightly pushy man.
Pushy.
And of course, let's have some sympathy for that man because society has told him he's got to be aggressive. And she's not giving it up because she's not smart enough to know.
And she might be on the pill, right?
She could be on the pill.
Procreate with
that
consequence.
That complicates things. Why is she on the pill?
Just have an older brother instead.
Why would you go on the pill? It's because you like sex. So then I have to, as a slightly pushy man, I have to compute. You like sex, but you won't have it. That hurts my feelings.
It's not adding up.
That hurts my feelings, and that's difficult. But I'm not blaming her, even though it's her fault.
Signal to men who are getting a little pushy, in no uncertain terms, very early in the pushing game, that no is the answer.
It's a game.
If you do that really early on in the investigation, you don't have to use much force. But unsophisticated women, they can't do that at all. They don't know how. And then what happens is they run into an unsophisticated guy. He's too dumb to pick up any clues. And then by the time she really wants to say no, she's already on the bed. I'll give you an example of this. I had one client
just a disgusting pig.
Yeah, I mean,
honestly. Is there not like a board isn't there a certification they can pull from this guy?
Oh no, he's being investigated and going to lose it.
Oh,
that's in the story. And
that's fair.
They're canceling.
It's unsophisticated. I'm being canceled. It's wokeness because I'm on the Daily Wire. That's what it is.
Jordan Peterson says Ontario psychologist license may be suspended over public statements, and I could say can't happen soon enough. College of Psychologists of Ontario.
Well, let's be honest here. It's not the fault of the man that they haven't been. The
whole like meets an unsophisticated man. That's because of the rape culture that you basically exist to apologize.
That's exactly it. That's exactly it. He is saying that rape is almost always in this analysis a function of a misunderstanding between an unsophisticated woman and a man who might be unsophisticated but mostly just doesn't understand what in society is ruining his masculinity. And then at the same time, he's pretending that he wants rape to be investigated more by making rape a crime against men who are either married to or the father of the woman. He doesn't care about the enforcement of rape because the entire underpinning of his argument is rape apology and rape denial.
And of course, there's some what's fascinating about this too is that he wants men to be invested through some form of ownership of the woman in the crime of rape. Otherwise, they won't uphold that crime there. But of course, it's unclear how many men are unsophisticated. It's pretty rare. And of course, if you have an unsophisticated man meeting an unsophisticated woman, then of course it is the fault of the woman for not, at the beginning of the game that I call Get to Rape. That's the game I call it. Or get to at the end, the investigation, as I call it. The investigation.
I call it pushy ball.
It is the responsibility of the unsophisticated woman to stop the unsophisticated man at that point, but she wouldn't know how to do that unless she's been properly trained by men. So there we go. And I guess we have a read for Jeremy's Razors.
The pushing game.
Oh, God. Unbelievable. That guy is really disturbing.
No, I mean, that audience, his audience is, he's encouraging his audience to sexually assault women, basically.
And it's not so bad. I'm just trying to explain away why they do it.
Yeah.
I mean, this is Jordan Peterson, who he's always been. The only reason it's confused people is he had like a glow up from the Atlantic and places like that, which like told him to lose the fedora and like couch his statements a little bit more soft. But like you go back to 2011, he's wearing a fedora saying it's all psychopathic boys who are going to like be empowered to have women, and just like insane like misogynistic fever dreams by this guy.
Yeah. And also I just think people like thought that, 12 rules for life, it's self-help, and then so many
Sam,
people
you got to get on your
filtered.
13 rules.
Yeah, right, or 13 sorry.
12 rules is easier because it's you can divide it into two. Mm-hmm. By 2, it's a factor of 2. That's the key.
Do 666 rules.
Numerology from Jordan Peterson.
Of course. Yin and yang. 6 and 6.
That's ancient.